My name is Patrick Sullivan. I'm President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's Navigating COVID-19 webinar with our guest, MP Darren Fisher. MP Darren Fisher has joined us today to answer our questions related to COVID-19, its effects on our community, and has some expertise on issues right across Canada in his role as Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much for joining us today. It says Mr. Fisher in my script. Can I call you Darren?
I think you know that you can call me anything you want.
All right. Okay. Okay, perfect. So just to remind everybody, there are across the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A function, so you can put questions in the Q&A. There's also a chat function. It's better to kind of keep things in the Q&A because then we can sort of tick them off and make them go away. But if you have chat comments, you can certainly do that as well. There's also an option as you're doing Q&A or chat. There's the option to address your message to panelists and all attendees. And I would encourage you all to do that. If you only put it to panelists only, Darren and I will see it. It's better if everybody sees it because somebody else may have the answer to the question. Okay. And then I think the final thing I would say, just to protect Darren and myself, is things are changing every day. So there are announcements that are happening, that happened a few days ago, and then there were changes to those announcements, recently. So there's just a lot of change going on. So I would just keep in mind that I don't think any of us know everything, but together we're going to know an awful lot. So just to keep that in mind. So Darren, I'm going to start off with something I didn't talk to you about, but you're the MP for Cole Harbour.
Dartmouth Cole Harbour, yeah.
Dartmouth Cole Harbour, sorry. And I expect it's a difficult time for Dartmouth Cole Harbour, like it is for the rest of the province right now after the tragedies last weekend.
Absolutely. And I mean, we are a province that is in mourning, Patrick, but we're resilient. So, I've said to several people, we're bent, but we're far from broken. And, what I see, so last night I just needed to clear my head, and I don't know what time it was, 9:30, and I decided to take my dog out for a walk after we had a little Nova Scotia caucus Zoom meeting. And there are candles in almost every window. There are Nova Scotia flags in almost every window. And, there is so much love and compassion in this province. But yeah, people are hurting right now. And to lose, how you always say when someone passes that person is so important to their community and so much, about how they are loved and respected in the community. This is absolutely true about this RCMP officer, Heidi Stevenson, and I speak about when I speak about her, I can't speak without mentioning Dean Stevenson, her husband, who works at Cole Harbour High. These are very, very, very integrated people in our community, and yes, this community is mourning.
Yeah. No, it's a terrible thing, and I think
we'll rise again. We'll rise again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I'm going to launch into some of the bigger picture questions, I think, because you have a dual role. You're obviously the MP for Dartmouth Cole Harbour, but you're also the Parliamentary Secretary for Health. And this is certainly an interesting time to be involved in I suppose, federal health. So I guess I'm going to ask a couple of specific questions. Status of PPE supplies for Nova Scotia. Do you know if we have enough? Is that a topic of conversation on calls?
It's probably one of the number one topics of conversation. And when we do our health committees, we've sat more, I think, than any other committee, House of Commons committee, somewhere around 14 or 15 times, I think, already. And it's the topic of conversation that people bring up the most. I will say, though, with regards to Nova Scotia, the provinces tend to order their own PPE. During something like this, we certainly assist. We have the stockpile, the federal stockpile as well, that we can contribute and we can distribute to provinces. We are now, as you are well aware, Patrick, and I'm sure your listeners are well aware, that we are working very, very hard to add to what the provinces have so that we can ensure that our healthcare providers have what they need. And, we've set up warehouses in China. We are buying what we can from whom we can. But one thing that we're doing that is really unique is we're We've got a made in Canada approach, and our staff in our office are inundated with emails from companies saying, I can do this, I can do that, we can create this. We've got Stanfield's doing gowns. We've got, I won't mention too many companies by name today. We've got companies out there that can work on potential vaccines. They can work on testing kits. They can work on medical gowns. They can work on swabs. They can work on face masks, hand sanitizers. And, we have this, you and I have this conversation, Patrick, about the creativity of Nova Scotian businesses and Atlantic Canadian businesses. This country is so able to compete and to contribute to this pandemic. It's one of the bright lights of a very troubling time.
Yeah.
So back to your question about Nova Scotia specifically. Just this week, Nova Scotia received a shipment on their own of 1.7 million masks, amongst other pieces of PPE. Now, I oftentimes try to be brutally honest about orders, because too often people will say, oh, well, we've ordered X amount of masks. Until they show up, I don't really think of them as something that's in inventory. I'm told by a very reliable source that there's another 1 million masks coming next week, but until they're here, they're not here. So again, the collaboration between the provinces and territories and the federal government on COVID-19 is something that I don't recall ever being so fulsome. So such a good relationship now between provinces and territories. Perfect. No, we've got a worldwide appetite and need for PPE, and we've got companies, whipping out a wallet full of cash to buy it right underneath the nose of another country. That's not something that anyone is going to be proud of when we do the postmortem on COVID-19, but it is the nature of where we are right now. So we have to use relationships federally and relationships provincially and territorially that we've built up over the years to ensure that our healthcare providers have what they need.
Right. Well, that's great. Now, what are you hearing from Dr. Tam, who's on TV, I think, almost every day, about Canada flattening the curve? I mean, are we flattening the curve?
I have to tell you, I have to say a huge public thanks to Dr. Tam. This is a person that has refused to take a day off since the new year. I'm on phone calls with her every single morning, 7 days a week. And she is a national treasure. And, I know sometimes she takes a little bit of flack, but you mentioned earlier that things are changing. Financial assistance from the government is changing. The response to the COVID-19 pandemic is changing because this virus is changing. It's incredible. We are learning new things every day. So are we flattening the curve? I would say, being safe, I would say that we are bending the curve. The curve is starting to bend. Is it flattening yet? I'd say no, but the number one contributing factor to flattening the curve is, as the Prime Minister has said, the behavior of Canadians. The more we do, the more we take this seriously, the more we keep our feet on the foot on the gas pedal, the more the curve will begin to flatten or plank, as Dr. Tam said. One of the things that, so Nova Scotia is quite indicative on a per capita basis of what's happening in some other provinces. Let's say last week we had one day there were 35 cases. A cluster can impact your data. What we have federally is only as good as the data that's coming to us. So if there's a cluster, say 25 of the 35 cases, I believe, were at a long-term health care or a long-term care facility, that impacts your data on whether you're actually flattening the curve. So if you have 35, and I don't need to teach you math, Patrick, you're a very bright guy, but if every single day you have 35 new cases, as the percentage of the total cases, you are reducing your numbers. So you are then, in fact, impacting that curve. So I would say, let's not take our foot off the gas pedal. Let's take this very seriously. When we get to a point where we start having discussions around opening up the economy, we will then need to find ways to do it in such a way that we don't jump back in with both feet and impact negatively that curve that we've worked so hard to impact positively.
Well, and you've kind of got my next to my next question now, which is Dr. Tam currently working on creating what might be a reopening plan for Canada, or is that more of a provincial responsibility, or
it is?
How is that going to work?
Yeah, so each province and territory will need to come up with a plan, and each province and territory are impacted in much different ways. You certainly wouldn't compare economy in Prince Edward Island and how it might be impacted by COVID as and compare it to, say, Quebec. So Quebec now, I think each day is having roughly 50% of all of the cases in the country. So it's going to be a different reopening process, but it is provincial and territorial. I would say Health Canada, Public Health, and Dr. Tam would certainly be there to provide guidance on how we might be able to ease our foot off the accelerator when we're ready to do that. And it's important that we, as I said, for the last question, it's important that we don't do it too soon. We are 5 or 6 or 7, could be 5 years into this. I don't know. Time is, I don't even know the days of the week anymore. But people are tiring of this. We have to find a way as leaders, as MLAs, as councillors, as members of parliament, and our prime minister to inspire people, to encourage them to keep going. Because we, again, as I said earlier, we are the number one. We have it in our hands. We hold it in our hands to be able to get this under control.
Right. And I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it's disappointing that we've seen, I shouldn't say it's disappointing. It's great that New Brunswick and PEI have had very small increases over the past little while. I mean, in fact, they seem to have flattened the curve quite significantly. In Nova Scotia, we're not quite seeing that flattening, but I think the numbers are a bit disrupted by what was an outbreak in Northwood. So I'd love to start seeing those numbers actually split a little bit to kind of get a better sense of when we might start to reopen. Obviously, Northwood is concerned, but
one thing that's important to note in that comment, though, is Nova Scotia per capita is testing more than any other province in the country. So we have to acknowledge that there are many more cases of COVID in Canada than the numbers that are tested positive.
Right. Yes. No,
right. So
very good point. Yeah.
New Brunswick could be testing 25 or 30% as many people as Nova Scotia are. So you have to assume, not suggesting that one province is worse off than another, but you do when you look at data, you do have to recognize that Nova Scotia is testing thousands more than some other provinces are.
Right. Okay. No, it's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. See, now I can tell you're the parliamentary secretary for health.
Well, and I if I could just take a quick second to give a shout out as well to Dr. Strang. Dr. Strang has, in my opinion, just been a rock star. He's calming, he's passionate, and I look forward to seeing him every day at 3 o'clock. And I feel that we're in good hands in Nova Scotia. Yeah, we have some issues with long-term care that other parts of the country have as well, and we need to find a way to take care of these very, very vulnerable but very, very important members of our community.
Right, absolutely. So now let's step back from the parliamentary secretary and kind of get down to your constituency a little bit. So I'm sure you've been talking to your constituents on a frequent basis. Not as much as I do when I'm going out to the Saturday market on Monday Landing, or we're going to Lake City Cider, or some of the supporting some of the amazing businesses. Now I'm, trunk side service is the best I can do. Right. Well, that's probably true. But what are you hearing from your constituents? I mean, since this has started, what are you hearing from folks?
So when this first started, almost everything was health related. And then it quickly shifted to economy and financial assistance. And I'm fortunate to be good friends with Sean Fraser, the MP in Central Nova, because not only is he brilliant, he's the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Finance. So I had, a very good connection with Sean, and by text message, I could get the information that I needed. So now the questions have shifted to government assistance, and the people that are reaching out are people that are scared, people that are worried, people that are struggling, they're paycheck to paycheck, businesses that are at 1 minute falling through a gap. And because of advocacy by people and organizations like yourself, by advocacy through feedback from constituents across the country, through their MPs, feedback from elected officials, we're finding a way to close as many of those gaps as possible. You made a comment in your opening statements about the fact that things are changing in government assistance. Well, they're changing because individual MPs are listening to constituents. They're listening to businesses. They're listening to people that have good, solid ideas. They're listening to unique cases from coast to coast. And every single day, 28 days straight, we had caucus calls where MPs were taking what they were hearing from those constituents and from those businesses about those unique cases. And they were taking them back to ministers, to the Prime Minister very often. And lo and behold, just when you think democracy doesn't work, you find out that it does. You find out that MPs from other parties will make a suggestion. You'll find out that MPs from small towns in BC or small towns out west will make suggestions based on things that they are hearing in their communities. And I will tell you that advocacy by MPs hasn't always worked, but it is working now. We have a government, we have a cabinet that is listening. Absolutely, I can tell you, the government is listening to what they're hearing. Will everybody be helped? It's unlikely. Let's be brutally honest. There are going to be some people that are going to fall through the cracks. But I believe the Prime Minister, when he says he's doing everything he can to ensure that people don't. Every time. So one thing that our office worked on very, very hard when the CERB came out, the emergency response benefit, it didn't recognize dividends as income. We worked very hard on that, and we got that fixed. We have other things we're working on that we're trying to get fixed as well. But let's think of assistance for university students. There are, loads of advocacy from many, many MPs across the country, but none advocated more for university students than MP Andy Fillmore, who, each and every time he had the opportunity to speak at these caucus calls, he brought up students. So it's again, if I'm an optimistic glass half full MP, when I see the things that are working, they shine a little bit of light on an otherwise terrible time in our history.
Yeah. I see Tim Rosesco asked a question, although I see he's now telling me he's got to go on another call, but I did want to ask, many of the businesses in downtown Dartmouth are small micro retailers that are worried about taking on more debt. What can we do to help them stay in business without being burdened by crushing debt as they come out of this?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have in downtown Dartmouth, and one of the things that we have in Dartmouth Cole Harbour as a whole, Burnside, we have Woodside, we have downtown Dartmouth, which has been really growing in positive ways in the last few years. And, they don't have long histories. And I was a small business person for 20 years. We never had several months of rent just sitting in the bank so that you could perhaps survive something like this. We have to find a way to allow these companies, these small micro businesses, to continue to grow, because I was talking to someone earlier today at around 1 o'clock that has been in business since the 60s. They're going to be okay. It's going to be tough, but they're going to be okay. But a brand new small business that just started within the last 2 years is someone that's going to need to be looked after. We need to find ways. When we talk about companies falling through the cracks, we have to find ways to solve those problems. We also know that this isn't everything. We've heard the Prime Minister say we're going to be looking at assistance for seniors. We've done started the process of the assistance for students, which, by the way, has to go through the House of Commons. It has to be legislated, and it will potentially see that advocacy level that I was telling you about from various MPs and work towards finding ways to fine tune that, because we're already hearing from some students that say, yes, but. So again, going back to what the Prime Minister says, finding ways to make sure that we help every Canadian that needs it is his goal. So we have to find a way to ensure that all of those new businesses, those businesses that don't have a March or an April last year to compare to when we set standards, we've changed that. Said, okay, we'll find other ways to work with you. We need to continue to do that. We need to continue to find ways to ensure that those businesses that bring so much vibrancy to our community. You talk about downtown Dartmouth, people smile. We were in an amazing position where downtown Dartmouth, and I'm speaking about Dartmouth Cole Harbour, but that specific area that Tim Rosesko is talking about now was ready for greatness. We had ferry boats full of Haligonians coming to the canteen on a Tuesday night. This is something that we have to make sure that when we come out the other side of this, those companies are there. We have to make sure that they succeed, and so that they continue to make our community even more vibrant in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you mentioned the canteen. We have to pay tribute to them because those folks they're now producing, and I'm not sure of the meals, but I know it's in the hundreds. Again,
between 200 and 400 a day, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's astounding that they've moved.
And they're expanding. They're opening new businesses. And again, I sound like I'm bragging when I'm talking about the downtown Dartmouth core. Tim can do this better than I can, but what we've got is we've got an ecosystem that's supportive. So all of the businesses in downtown support all of the other businesses in downtown. They don't compete with them. They support them. So they all benefit. And we say all ships rise with the tide. That's exactly what's happening in parts of Dartmouth.
Yeah, no, I agree. So just a reminder to everybody, you can ask questions through the Q&A at the bottom. And I'll just follow up with another question in a second. But so ask your questions, or you can chat as well. You can chat privately or to everyone. I'd encourage you to kind of put any questions or comments you have up there for everyone in case anyone wants to ask.
And if you have, Patrick, if you have specific, unique situations, and I've said this at your roundtable before, Patrick, build a relationship with your councillors, your MLAs, and your MPs. Reach out to your MP's office, your specific MP, regardless of where you're calling in from today. Ask those questions, because each case is unique, and unique cases lead to changes and fills in gaps.
Right, absolutely. So on to another question here. I see a question on the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, which was announced last week, which looks great. It seems to be focused on rural areas. But do you have any sense or any update on the additional budget going to ACOA and to help businesses in Halifax, Dartmouth with patient capital to help businesses survive longer term?
I don't have a whole lot on that particular fund right now, Patrick. That's something that, again, we can get to you through email to our office if you wish, or email to your specific MP on that. I do think that it's a really good use of our regional development agency. We're fortunate here in Atlantic Canada to have ACOA, and I will say that, not to speak out of caucus, but the other parts of the country lament not having something as solid as an ACOA. And when ACOA switched over in the last several years to being evidence-based 100%, the people on the ground at ACOA are so bright that they have excellent track record. So using them to get funds out to help these companies in further ways where they didn't normally fit a square peg in a round hole, for instance, using ACOA is a fantastic idea.
Well, and since I am talking to government every single day, I do know a little bit about this. So in talking to ACOA yesterday, they intend to have their plan, if you will, for a rough plan available Monday or Tuesday next week. So they hope to have allocated what is roughly a 50% budget increase by that time, so that they will have something for the more urban areas. And when that sort of question came about the rural areas, that there was additional money that was given to the CBDC groups, and that money is kind of being rolled out by the CBDCs to rural areas across Nova Scotia and in Atlantic Canada. Another question on rent deferral. So although the provincial rent deferral program, which was the rent deferral program about, 3 weeks ago now, was good for small business in the short term in June, what's the federal government plan for landlords when they get relief, who'll flow it to tenants who are small businesses? Rent deferral after June is not going to be a solution, as increased debt will only create bigger problems. This won't be a reopening. It'll be more of a rebuilding for businesses. So it gets deferral.
Well, we do have I don't know how they pronounce it, but I guess it's the SECRA, the CECRA, the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. Again, where rent is provincial, it's something that we can't do unless we partner with our provinces and territories. But we've shown a willingness to partner, a willingness to help in all these things that tend to be provincial jurisdiction. So this is something that I'm told that we are already in negotiations with Nova Scotia on this, so that we can continue to find ways to help those groups. Because again, back to my earlier comments, we can't afford to not ensure that our economy is ready to come back when this is over. It's not something that, you don't want to rebuild an economy, you want to restart an economy. It's absolutely imperative that we ensure that those groups are there, ready to turn the engine back on at a snap of the finger.
Right. And I guess I would say again, I think you really need to keep a close eye on the provincial government over the next couple of days. Today's Thursday and Friday.
You know something.
Well, I could not say, but I believe there will be announcements very shortly. And I say that because Manitoba did announce how the Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program would work. And I suspect that there are many provinces not far behind in discussions with the federal government on that as well. Let's see, I see a question as well. Our company just opened 3 months ago, so taking on more lending is not a good option. Will there be other types of funding coming down the pipe for companies like us?
Yeah, and again, realizing startups, are someone that, a sector that we absolutely, there's a lot of sectors out there that we're going to need to help. And startups is one of them. New businesses was one of them. Again, I think I've already made an awful lot of those comments about how we have to ensure that those startups, those new businesses are able to succeed. Is everyone going to succeed? Probably not, but I sure hope so. We've really become a fertile ground for startups. So we have to make sure that we find ways to help them all. Whether it be CEBA or whether it be the wage subsidy. You talked about it again in your opening comments about, we had a 10% wage subsidy idea and found out from folks like yourselves and businesses that, were reaching out to their MPs across the country that wasn't enough. We went back to work. We said, okay, so this is still going to happen. It's almost like we're selling tickets on an airplane that's not completely built yet. So, when you have individual cases, you have to, again, reach out to your MPs and let them know what your situation is. We know there's more to come. We know there's sectoral help to come. We know there is stimulus money to come. When we are ready to get back to work, we have to make sure that we have the fiscal firepower, which we're told we do, to be able to stimulate the economy when people are ready to go back to work. So if the parliamentary budget officer tells us so we have the fiscal firepower to do that, we have to be prepared to do that. And there are different sectors that are hurting here, and there are some that are falling through the cracks that will be helped through sectoral assistance. Whether it be tourism, whether it be the airline industry. There are not two industries that are probably more negatively impacted by this than tourism and the airline sector. Those are sectors and we have constituents, businesses that we know are struggling right now because they're in these sectors. So there's still more to do. Again, I would continue to reach out when you have specific cases to your MP and get them on these cases for you.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. And reach out to the chamber as well, just to kind of put a pitch in there. We're happy to take that call,
Absolutely.
happy to advocate
Yep.
en masse. To answer the question directly, I guess on the funding options that aren't loans, the SEBA. You mentioned the SEBA, which has changed. I mean, it was $50,000 to $1 million, or $50,000, I think, to $1 million in salary. It's now $20,000 to $1.5 million in salary. If you don't have salary, so therefore, if you're under $20,000 in salary, it's my belief that the province will be the group that will come to the party next, with something that's under $20,000 in salary for individual businesses. So nothing is one size fits all. I think of this as a cascade.
Yeah.
Start with federal programs.
And we're absolutely seeing that, Patrick. We're seeing that everybody does their business differently. Everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I did mention something to you before we got on the phone, but I'll bring it back, which is before we got everyone on the call, and that's folks that have dividend income. And I know that changed for the Canadian Emergency Business Account. The CERB, for the CERB. But I don't know that it's changed yet for SEBA. But I mean, I'd like to make a pitch that folks with dividends are effectively paying salaries too. They certainly tell me they're paying taxes. So it would be great on an advocacy point to kind of get that into your ear, I suppose.
So that is very much in our ear. In fact, it was our office, I think, that led the charge on dividends for CERB, recognizing income. I believe that if I can give credit to certain MPs for certain things, that's one our office worked very, very hard on. And I will tell you that today I sent messages about how we need to be able to see dividends as income with regards to other government assistance as well. So I had a business for 20 years, and that's how we drew income. We drew income as dividends.
Right.
So again, going back to every business does things differently. Dividends are your income, and they need to be seen as such. So that's in our ear. That's a topic of discussion every day. Great.
Okay. Another question, is the government looking into activities of large insurance companies who are slow to respond or reduce premiums for businesses who are presently not operating? Does that sound like something you've heard of before?
I mean, it's like when you're dealing with the banks, you can encourage. Sometimes you're limited in what you can actually do. We hear from MPs across the country that they're not thrilled with necessarily some of the big institutions and how they're responding to this. You can encourage, you can incentivize, but sometimes not everything is within your control.
Right.
As a federal MP and a federal government.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think part of it, I know we were talking to a number of the banks recently, and one of the things they told us was, they weren't ready, obviously, when the federal government announced the Canadian Emergency Business Account. It took them time to ramp up to get ready for that. But now, I think I talked to RBC the other day. They processed 90% of the applications now for the SEBA account, and are moving forward, much more quickly now. So I think everybody has the best of intentions. Everybody wants to help where they can, but you have to remember that the person that owns the building that rents to the small commercial tenant, they have bills to pay as well. And it's one of those things is, how do you find ways? How do you find ways to help everybody? How do you find ways to ensure that all of those folks are going to be there when we come out the side? Right. Yeah, absolutely. So just a reminder for folks on the questions, again, you can just press the Q&A or the chat function to sort of answer them either way. We did talk a little bit about the wage subsidy briefly, I think. The wage subsidy is now 75%. It's really for any company. There's no size requirement, but it's 12 weeks. And 12 weeks is a relatively short period of time because we're already 5 weeks in. and we've yet to see reopening. And for many businesses, I don't know that they'll see the the open doors and the large crowds that they may have had in their establishments in the past. So, what are the chances of getting the wage subsidy extended?
I would suggest that on all of these programs that have a end date, we will have to revisit those based on what tomorrow looks like, what next month looks like, what 3 months down the road looks like. There's no way we're going to invest millions of dollars in saving our economy and preparing our economy for a restart and then just stop. We can afford to help. We can't afford not to. It's something that this is an investment in our very strong economy. We've put a pause on it. Right now, we don't know if the pause is 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. I would suggest that none of this is the end yet. So I would suggest that we will continue to monitor those things. And if we need to extend them, I would suggest that we probably would look very closely at that.
Okay.
The last thing we want to do, Patrick, is put everything on a pause and then not willing to go that extra step and then see these businesses fail.
Right. No, I think that's a very fair comment.
Yeah.
After paying the wage subsidy for 3 months, if 1 more month, is going to get somebody over this, then I wouldn't think that that's something that you want to give up at that point.
Yeah. And the prime minister has been very clear on making sure that we do what we can for Canadian citizens, what we can for Canadian businesses, and what we can to ensure that, again, when we come out the other side, that our economy is ready to, I think the deputy prime minister said, what did she say, kickstart the economy? I can't remember what she said, but there are still high hopes for a big return for our economy because it was taken so well, because we're in such a great position as compared to many, many countries. And not to put words in Mr. Morneau's mouth, but I believe the assistance that we've put on paper so far is more significant, I think, than any other comparable country. So we're serious about this. We're serious about ensuring that we, do the right thing and invest in these Canadian businesses and these Canadian people.
That's great. Okay, and maybe we just kind of talk through the question that I'm going to ask now. But will the wage subsidy and CEBA deadlines be extended for those of us who draw dividends instead of payroll? So I think we're back to the dividend question. So for CEBA, there isn't a dividend option at this point.
Yeah. At this point.
Yeah, at this point. So you can do, if you'd like to text right now to the Prime Minister and let him know that. But I think you get a lot of happy faces on the call.
I talked to an MP one time on a plane that had said he was an MP for several years and never had a call from the Prime Minister. And we had two on, after I think it was on Monday or Tuesday, 2 calls from the Prime Minister. So this is a Prime Minister that's very in tune with his MPs. And, I had talked about our nightly caucus calls, and it's not rare at all for him to be on the line and for him to chime in with responses. And I don't know if that's the way it always was, but that's certainly the way it is with this particular Prime Minister. He wants to hear from his MPs. And we see time and time again that when he does hear from his MPs, you'll hear about it the next day on one of those announcements that something is changing. Right. So, and the wage subsidy is one thing, and the student, the investments in students is another thing. These are things that are direct advocacy by MPs for their constituents.
Okay. And again, I would say again, as I said a few moments ago, on the wage subsidy for those that are taking dividends, that would mean that you are likely less than $20,000 in salary. I would look to the provincial government, at least right now, and see if there are some things coming from the province over the next little while. While obviously we continue to advocate federally for an expansion of the wage subsidy and CEBA to folks who draw dividends. Question: how soon will after the application process, are you expecting that the 75% wage subsidy funds will flow to small businesses?
Yeah, so I've heard numerous answers to this question, and I would only be guessing. Um, I've heard 10 to 15 days. I've heard 3 weeks. I wouldn't want to give you a definitive rollout answer on this. I know that the expectation and hope and the desire is to get it out as fast as humanly possible. You saw when it passed through the House of Commons, the applications, the process has been working so far. Knock on my dining room table here in Mi'kma'ki, but we have to hope, fingers crossed, that this is a seamless rollout. Because again, when things need to be legislated, it always slows the process down, and creating public policy sometimes over a long weekend of 72 hours in order to get it in front of the House of Commons in reduced numbers on a policy that's impacting millions of Canadians is unprecedented, just like this whole pandemic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just put out a link to the wage subsidy. Wage subsidy calculator, which apparently you need to do before you can actually apply for the wage subsidy. So you need to fill out that information. I know the Chamber of Commerce, we did it yesterday. We filled out the wage subsidy used the wage subsidy calculator, and it was pretty much exactly what we thought it was going to be. So I would encourage people to take a look at that link and to calculate your wage subsidy. I've heard, we've all heard different things, and I think the times have changed. I was shocked at how quickly the CERB benefit got in people's hands. It was, they applied and it was in their hands in a couple of days. I'd like to think that it's going to be faster than slower on the wage subsidy. Given that it's coming from Revenue Canada and they know how to get money into accounts, just as they know how to get money out, I think it should be fairly quick. I want to get back to the federal government. In terms of debt, I used to talk about taxes and I used to talk about deficits. I don't talk that way quite as much anymore. What are you thinking? The government is publishing how much all this is counting or accumulating to. Do you think that Canada has the fiscal capacity to continue to invest in businesses this way?
So we are publishing what it could cost. There's no, until the application process is done and we're out the other side, we don't really know, but we're certainly publishing in a transparent manner what it could cost. But these are investments, and we're told very clearly that we have the fiscal firepower to do what we need to do. The parliamentary budget officer has been very clear that our economy is strong, and this is a mere pause. So, but we don't know yet, because we don't know what the end result is. We don't know whether we're going to have to expand on these programs. We don't know what sectoral assistance looks like. We don't know what stimulus looks like. These are questions that haven't been answered yet, and we certainly can't go this far and then stop. We need to make sure we apply the right amount of assistance. You talk about being happy that we've come out of the gate with the CERB in a reasonably positive way. We need to make sure that those other programs that come out just the same way. And yes, CRA has been doing a great job, and I want to say publicly, the public servants, Canadian public servants, have been doing incredible work. Those service centers are closed in many cases. They're working from home. I would suggest there's not an awful lot of sleep, because people know how much is riding on this. They know that getting this right and getting the money in the hands of Canadians, this is serious stuff. This is serious stuff. So, I tip my hat to those public servants that, there's no days off for those folks. They're working very, very hard to ensure that the things that, and it's public policy written on the fly, and then we're asking them to deliver it in a seamless manner to Canadians. And so far, again, knock on wood, but it seems to be working. Are we going to make some mistakes? I'm sure we will. Will we have time for a post-mortem at the end of this? Sure we will. We can look at how we rolled all this out, and hopefully we'll be doing that, with a booming economy once again, and businesses that are saying, okay, we got the right amount of assistance to keep us going and get us back on our feet when we needed it.
Yeah, well, and I think you're absolutely right, and my congratulations, actually, to all levels of government, particularly the federal government, because that's where the majority of the initiatives have come from over the last little while. You know, they are absolutely listening, and through the MPs, I know you know that we have Andy on a call every 2 days as part of our Nova Scotia Business Labor Economic Coalition, which has now grown to 165 people on the calls. You know, over 100 people every call that represent probably 200,000 employees in the employees, labor, all sorts of folks, not-for-profits across the province of Nova Scotia, and we're feeding back that information to the federal government. And you know, I'm now texting Sean Fraser and texting Andy. They may regret giving me those cell phone numbers later, but right now,
that's a good tip. Thank you. I'll make sure I don't do that.
Okay, too late. I've got your. But you know, it's great to be able to communicate so quickly and to have the folks at the political level, but also the bureaucratic level, so responsive to.
And one thing I can add to that, Patrick, that's something that may be unprecedented for Nova Scotia is, you know, we have our Minister of Fisheries, but we have Parliamentary Secretary to Infrastructure, Andy Fillmore, the Parliamentary Secretary to Veterans, and Daryl Sampson, and the Parliamentary Secretary of what's going to be very, very important for rebooting the economy in Nova Scotia and in Atlantic Canada, the Parliamentary Secretary for Infrastructure, and Andy Fillmore. So having those folks at the table is big for our province, for our Atlantic region. You know, when you advocate by text message to Sean Fraser, you're advocating to the Parliamentary Secretary to Bill Morneau.
Yeah.
And I don't know of a time in my life where we've had that connectivity to the cabinet table. Perhaps it's happened in the past, but I think it needs to be said that this is a good time politically. And I will give lots of credit to the provincial governments across the country. But you know, the provincial government here in Nova Scotia, I think, has done a good job working with the federal government, understanding where there are jurisdictional issues and saying, okay, we know that this is our jurisdiction. If you're willing to come to the table to help us, i.e. commercial rents, we're willing to play ball, and we're appreciative of the work that you're going to do because you're appreciative of the work that we need to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the only thing I would say is, and I absolutely agree with that, the only thing I would say is, as we are coming up again to the end of a month, you know, people are starting to get nervous again, as they rightfully should, about the costs that they're going to need to bear in terms of rent and utilities and all of those fixed costs that they have. You know, so we'll be advocating with the provincial government. It's great to have that one-time provincial business impact grant, as perhaps limited as it was, of $5,000 to a certain number of organizations. We need an expansion there, and we need them to do it again because business has not yet reopened.
Yep. Special thanks to you and your members for continuously pushing these things and guiding and providing good, solid advice on what the needs are for your members. Without groups like yourselves, you know, we'd be potentially floundering, trying to figure this out on a one-by-one, case-by-case basis. And we're still doing that to some extent anyway, but having groups like yourself advocate for your members is so valuable to us, so valuable. And we see you as a very important partner of us.
Yeah, well, and thank you. But I will tell you, you know, it's a tribute to our members. We don't want to go into a mutual admiration society here, but you know, it's our members who are giving us lots of information, so they need to keep doing that. What can I ask you? You know, we're getting close to wrapping up here. What can I ask you? Again, I'm going to go back to the Parliamentary Secretary for Health and say, what's the most important message from Health Canada right now?
I would say, I'll take it away from Health Canada and maybe put it on what Dr. Tam would say as our public health expert. I would say that she would probably tell you today and tell your members, keep your foot on the gas pedal, keep doing what you're doing. Social distancing, you know, people are tired of being told to wash their hands, but these are the things that work. If you want the economy to be reopened, if you want to see those first steps of back to somewhat normal, whether it be new normal. Keep your foot on the gas pedal, keep doing what you're doing and taking this seriously. Going back to bragging about some of the local businesses in the area, I think we had a chance to touch on this, Patrick, before we went live. We've got businesses adapting at record speed, and they're doing so because they have to. And they're seeing, not to speak to someone's bottom line, but I suggest that I could name you, I won't, but I could probably name you 2 or 3 or 4 businesses in the Dartmouth area that have had an increase in sales. And I'm not talking about grocery. There are restaurants that are delivering mass amounts of meals to people. The province stepped in and said, we'll allow you to sell wine and beer as well when you're doing these deliveries, which was very, very quick, very nimble for the provincial government to be able to do something like that, because you still can't walk outside of a bar on Argyle Street with a beer in your hand and go into another bar like you can in many countries and cities across the world. So that was something that nothing sees the ability to change something quickly than perhaps a pandemic. But, you know, we're seeing businesses learn to adapt very, very quickly to their benefit. I don't know what that looks like. Are you still going to order your wine online and have it dropped off at the front of your house in 4 months or 5 months? Or are you going to get back to what was once normal and go to the NSLC or Harvest Wines or Nine Locks and pick up your beverages like you always did? You know, are these businesses going to continue to do this because perhaps it lowers their costs by doing this? You know, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but I would suggest that you're going to see some changes. You know, just one minor example, back to health for a second. Telehealth was a pilot project that was floundering, and telehealth now is booming. People are emailing for prescriptions, and just like the proponents of telehealth said, it works. It can continue to work. So people, I guess my long-winded point here, Patrick, is that business as usual may change a little bit, and people will determine whether that's something that they're willing to do. You know, right now you're probably seeing an awful lot of online buying, and a lot of Canadian businesses have jumped right on online buying. Some of these small retailers have figured out how to put together a really good online capacity, and they're reaping the benefits of it. These are small businesses, some of them that weren't around 3 and 4 years ago. Now, we talk about some of the startups, we talk about some of the businesses that are 1, 2, 3 years old. Some of them are the ones that are the most nimble and the ones that are able to change quickly. Because like I said earlier, from my times in small business, you need to be able to adapt or you won't survive.
Right. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And I think there are lots of things people can do. I would say that the support is really, really important to ensure that you know, we are getting the cash, I suppose, to keep the business going, to keep the engine you know, turning, so that we can get back out of this.
Yeah.
I see.
And it's an investment. It's an investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
It truly is. It's an investment in an economy that was booming at the time and will boom again.
Yeah, I see. I do have one hand raised, so I'm gonna let Cheryl Stewart Walsh ask a question. Cheryl, would you like to ask a question?
I would love to. Thank you, Patrick.
So, Pat, first of all, Patrick, letting Cheryl Stewart Walsh ask a question might be a mistake.
Well, keeping in mind we have 3 minutes left, everybody.
It's going to be very quick. It has nothing to do with my business particularly, but more around the life science strategy for Canada. Darren, just wondering, are there discussions at the national level that are focused around made in Canada, by Canada, value supply chain for the future? So I know that there's lots of discussions around, like, what is our capacity right now to develop in Canada approaches to PPEs, for example. But do you think that there's going to be more focus on the national level around life sciences in a more coherent approach to how we develop in Canada value chains?
So I would say, thank you for that question. I would say that I think there's a lot of pride in this made in Canada approach. There was a lot of there was a lot of pride when companies came forward and said, we can do this, and the federal government willing to come to the table to help these Canadian businesses retool. I think the number that I heard was 15,000 businesses reached out saying that they had the ability to retool what they normally do. And I mean, you see the stories in the news about, small distilleries or small breweries doing hand sanitizer. It's way more than that. It's way more than that. It's testing kits, it's swabs, it's the investment that our government put into science starting back in 2015 we saw it reap benefits locally. We saw it reap benefits across the country. We have people moving to Nova Scotia now doing things that they would have always had to do in big cities across the country, or more importantly in other countries. Now we can do anything from anywhere in the country. Rural, urban, suburban, it doesn't matter. We've got the ability, we've got the smarts, we've got the know-how. It's a brain gain that we've been seeing. And I don't think, Cheryl, to circle back to your question, I don't think that that's going to stop. I think you're going to see us suggest that, well, why is it that this other country tends to be the country that manufactures this? Why can't we be our own supply chain? Why can't we contribute? Why can't we then build and manufacture and export to some of the other countries that we're buying it? I'd suggest that it's a time that Canada is open for business, and we've got the ability to do anything we want from our home base here. And I think you're going to just see that grow.
That's great. Okay, thanks, Darren. I'm just going to share my screen for one brief moment, just so that I can show everybody that I think this will do it. Some of the resources that are, oh gosh, now where is that? I don't know what I'm showing. Let's see, am I showing this? I don't think I am. Let's see, hard to show this screen. Let's see. I'll try one last time, and then if it doesn't work, I will move back. There we go. Nope, I'm not going to do it. Anyway, it didn't seem to work. Well, I would encourage people to take a look at the Halifax Chamber homepage, and from there you'll find a COVID-19 link right up on top of the page. And there's lots of great information there on all of the federal resources, the provincial resources, the municipal resources, how to support local. So for those of you that are restaurants, we have the downtown Dartmouth restaurants and retailers that are open. We have the downtown Halifax restaurants. We also have Spring Garden Road. We have Quimple Road. We have lots of folks that are open. And lots of other programs there as well from the financial institutions, business-to-business support. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And I would encourage you to listen along to some of the other webinars that we have. We are just developing May right now. So we have a number next week, and we'll have a lot more coming up in the next few weeks. At this point, Darren, I'd like to thank you very much for being available, and thanks for the cell phone number. And I'll get back to you with many questions. But I appreciate.
Did you just text me now?
I did not. No, I did not. No. Maybe Sandra did. So anyway, thank you very much for joining us today. And
it was my pleasure. My pleasure.
And my best to Cole Harbour. So
thank you. Thank you for that.
All right. Thanks.
Light a candle. Put a candle in your window.
Yes. I saw there was a Nova Scotia flag printed page in the Chronicle Herald this morning, which I put up in my window. Beautiful. And would encourage other folks to pick up a copy if you don't have a copy already, if you can find a copy, I suppose, at your local store. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll look forward to, we will be posting this, so you can take a look at it, and we look forward to having you join us at our next event. Thanks everybody, and thank you, Darren.
Thank you.